Hello everybody, my name is Michael Wagner. I teach at the Westphal College of Media Arts and Design at Drexel University in Philadelphia. And on this channel I talk about digital media, game design and spatial audio. Now this is part number 8 and also the last part of my series on game audio, or more specifically on how to integrate audio into Unity game development project using Audiokinetic Wwise. We did a lot of things so far, we covered a lot of ground, and there are essentially 2 things I would like to add at the very end. And those are, first of all, we're going to talk about triggers and stingers, which essentially means we're going to add sound effects that play in sync with the music. And then we're going to talk about callback functions. That is a way on how we can have Audiokinetic Wwise send events back into Unity so that the music can trigger Unity events, and we're going to use that in order to create a little box that is jumping in sync with the music. Now let's get started. Let's look at what we have so far. And I've already opened up, as always, the project in Unity as well as in Wwise. And let's have a quick walkthrough of what we have so far. Now, the last time we talked about interactive music, and we created this little tune out of a couple of a construction set, really, from Überschall. And what we want to do today is we want to first we want to add something here on top of that building. So here on top, what I would like to do is, first of all, I would like to create a little stinger. Oops, I'm running against the wall here. I'd like to create a little bit of a sound effect here when I enter that top floor that plays in sync with the music. So essentially on the downbeat, like an impact that's happening exactly on the downbeat. And later I'm going to add a little box here that is going to jump with the beat. Okay, so first things first, let's go into Wwise. The way we are going to implement that stinger is exactly that. We're going to implement a stinger, and that is going to be triggered with a trigger. How cool is that? So a couple of things we need to do. First of all, we need to create a stinger in the interactive music hierarchy. Now I'm going to put all the stingers in one virtual folder. So let's create a new virtual folder here in the interactive music hierarchy, and let's call that stingers. And then I'm going to add a sound effect that we're going to use as a stinger. And for that sound effect, we're going to come back to the Sonis bundle. So let me just go back to the Sonis audio bundle here. Where are we? Sonis and Sonis Game Developer 2020 Game Audio Bundle. And in the Game Audio Bundle, we have a subfolder that is called Smart Sound Effects, if I'm not completely mistaken. Where are we? Smart sound effects, exactly here. Impacts, hits, and whooshes. And in impacts, hits, and whooshes, we have this epic punch. That's the one we're going to use. So let's take that and let's move that into the stingers folder here. And let's just import that. And the first thing we need to do is we need to prepare that to be a stinger. And in order to prepare that, we need to tell the system that start and end point of the segment are essentially the same. The idea being that that stinger is essentially just playing at a downbeat. And that is exactly the moment sort of that punch of the stinger is hitting. So let's go back into the music layout, and in the music layout we will be able to see this little clip. So let's just play it. Now it's currently routed through the master bus. Let's right away route that through the music bus, because if I remember correctly, we actually kind of changed the volume in the music bus slightly. Okay, there's one thing that I'm currently seeing, and that's actually one of the disadvantages of the way we implemented that reverb last time. The reverb is for the tunnel is created through an auxiliary bus that is added to the music, and we're currently actually hearing that reverb if you care for it. So in order to get that out of the mixing environment, what I need to do is I need to go into the mixer layout. And in the mixer layout, in the under the states, show all states, I need to set it to off. By default, it is none, and none essentially means that it's routed through that reverb. So once we have that, we actually will no longer hear the reverb if we play something through the music bus. So let's go back to the designer layout, and let's try that. Oops, sorry, to the interactive music layout, and let's try that again. Oops, that is the wrong one. I want this one. Okay, now without reverb. The impact is hitting pretty much exactly at beat number 2. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move the in and out cues. And once again, you need to press the control button on Windows in order to move the green marker and the red marker. So these in and out points are exactly the same for a stinger. And that should just be at exactly the point where that impact is actually happening. So let me just double check if that's the case. Yeah, that seems to be the case. And once again, we can go back later and kind of adjust it if necessary. So we now have that stinger here. Second thing we need to do is we need to add a trigger that triggers that particular stinger. So we go to the Game Syncs tab, and under Triggers, we're going to add a trigger. And let's call that Top Floor, because I want to trigger it when I'm entering the top floor. That's actually pretty much everything we need to do at the trigger. So there's nothing to set for us here. And the final thing is I need to add that trigger along with the stinger to the music piece. Now, because the trigger is triggering in sync with that particular music piece, there is a connection between the trigger and the music piece. And if the music piece is not playing, the trigger is not going to be triggered, obviously. So we need to add the trigger to the actual music piece. And if you want to have the trigger triggered at multiple music pieces, you need to add that to each individual music piece. Now we currently only have one, so let's go to the playground one. And in the playground one, we have in the tab stingers here, the possibility to add as many stingers as we want, and they're always triggered by a certain trigger. So let me add a trigger. Now I currently only have one, so if I click on that, the only one that I have right now is top floor, so I'm going to add that one. And then I need to say what segment do I want to play, and the segment that I want to play is that stinger that I have here, this Impact Dark Epic Punch. So I'm going to put that here. And the final thing I need to do is I need to tell the system when exactly do I want to play it. Currently this is set at immediate. I want to actually play that after the bar. So the bar needs to complete. And after the bar has been completed, I'd like to, I would like to actually kind of play that at the downbeat. So what I'm going to say, it's supposed to be played at the next bar. Now there are a couple of different options. I can play it at the next beat or the next cue. We are going to simply say at the next bar. So now I've added the trigger with the stinger to the music piece. So the last thing I need to do here is I also need to add an event. And for that I go into the events tab, and under the music I'm going to add a new event, and let's call that play top floor. Top floor. And currently nothing is set yet. So I'm going to add an event, an actual event to that Wwise event. And the event that I'm going to add is a trigger event. So I'm going to add a trigger here. And then I need to say what trigger do I want to trigger. The trigger that I want to trigger is the top floor trigger. So I move that in here. And so that is set. And the last thing I need to do is I need to put that event into the sound bank layout, into the main sound bank. Sorry, so I go into the sound bank layout and take that play top floor event and move that into the main sound bank to have that in here. And then I'm going to say save. I'm going to say generate selected. And I have everything here. Now, before I continue with Unity, I would like to check if everything is actually working correctly. And the best way to do that, obviously, is to go into the mixer layout. So let's go into the mixer layout. And let's add this play top floor event to our events in the Soundcaster layout that we are using here. And we just make sure that the tunnel reverb is set off. We already had to do that because otherwise Wwise would constantly route the music bus through the auxiliary bus of the reverb. And so let's see how that works. So if I'm playing the playground music, and then triggering the play top floor trigger, it should actually kind of play that trigger delayed at the beat of the music. So let's start the playground sound. And I'm just waiting for the rhythm to come in. To make that a little bit clearer. So if I'm now clicking on the play, it will not play it immediately, but what it will do is it will play it at the end of the bar. I can do the same thing again. So if I trigger it again, so it's always going to play that in sync with the music. Let's try that one more time. And that seems to actually be working fine. So everything seems to be okay. And maybe let's just I had the feeling that the stinger is a little bit too loud. So let's just kind of bring that down just a slight bit. So let's go into the designer layout and let's just bring the epic punch down, maybe 60 dB. Let's go back to the mixer layout and let's see. Let's trigger that. I think that's it. Obviously depends a lot on what you want to do with that, but I felt that impact was a little too harsh. So let's go back to now we need to regenerate the sound bank because I made a couple of changes. Let's generate the selected. Let's just make sure that everything is saved. Let's save the project. And the next thing I need to do is I need to add that to our Unity project. So let's go into Unity. I've already opened up that Unity project. And what I want to do, once again, I want to add that trigger to that area here. So when I enter that top floor, the idea is that this is going to trigger the stinger the stinger effect. So I'm going to add a little collider here that's going to serve as a trigger. So let's first add that. So I'm going to add an empty object and let's call that top floor. Sorry, top floor. And I'm going to add a box collider. And I'm going to make sure that this is only a trigger. Now, I first need to make sure that it's actually sitting correctly, and you would move that and make sure that everything is scaled correctly. Now, I already did that in advance, so I know the numbers to punch in, so I'm going to simply punch that in. So the X needs to be 5, this needs to be 7, and this needs to be 9. That brings that trigger area here, and then you just need to scale it to make sure that it is in scale. 2 and 4, 3, 2 and 4, and that creates this little trigger area here. Okay, next thing I need to do is I need to add the trigger event, and for that let's take that play top floor event, let's move that into the trigger environment, let's add a rigid body, we have done that a number of times. Let's make sure that we only trigger when we want to, and that means only when we actually enter that trigger area. So first of all, let's select nothing to make sure that we are deselecting everything that was already there. And then let's say we want to trigger that on AK trigger enter. We are going to use the other object because the sound is on the other object. And then we are essentially, so far we have everything here. The only thing that's missing is we need to make sure that this is not triggered by anything other than the player object. So I'm going to add an additional AK trigger enter component, and in this AK trigger enter component I'm going to use the player capsule to trigger only. So that makes sure that only that player capsule can trigger that. And with that we should actually have everything. So let's see if we're getting anywhere. So let's play. So let me just wait until the beat kicks in so that we get a better sense of if things are actually working correctly. If I'm now enter, I should hear that that impact happening at exactly the beat. I can actually repeat that. I just had this, so let me do that one more time. So it is exactly in sync with the beat. Now that allows you to create effects that are in sync with the beat, and once again you can also create them in sync with in this particular case with the bar. We can also do that in sync with the beat. Depends a little bit on how fast you want that to happen, and that can be very powerful because it allows you really to create a more of a musical experience where everything is in sync with things and things are progressing with the beat of the music. Okay, so the last thing I want to do is I want to add a little cube that is jumping in sync with the beat. And where we're going to put it is on the top floor, as we said before. So let me go back to the Unity project here, and essentially I want to place a little cube here, and this cube is supposed to jump in sync with the music, and we're going to use the callback function for that purpose. A callback function is something that allows Wwise to communicate into Unity, or more accurately to call a certain function in case a certain event is triggered within Wwise. So this is a way where Wwise can trigger things in Unity. We use game parameters for Unity to communicate into Wwise, and this is something where we communicate from Wwise into Unity. Now, the first things first, first thing I need to do is I need to add and let's do it the following way. Let's add an empty object here, and let's call that jumping cube. And in this jumping cube, I'm going to add the one of those prefabs that I already used here. So I'm going to go into the assets directory, and under the environment, I have a folder that's called prefabs, and in prefabs I have this box 100 by 100. So I'm going to move that in here. And then I'm just going to make sure that everything is set. So first of all, let me reset it to 000. Now, you could obviously kind of move that to the position here. I already did that in advance. So let me just punch in the numbers here. So if we move that to 4, 6.5, it's now in the air here, and then essentially 10. It's going to move here. Now we want to have that box to have physical properties. So the next thing we also need to do is we need to add a rigid body. Otherwise, this is not going to happen. And so that essentially physics is or gravity is operating on that, and essentially we need to add that. And that is as far as it goes with our cube. That cube should once again jump in sync with the music. Now the music itself lives on the player capsule. And if you go to the AK ambient event that this music is based on, you will have this little box here, use callback, and that will tell Wwise to call a certain function within Unity whenever something is happening. And in order to enable that, we simply need to tick that box, and that will then open up a couple of fields for us to fill out. The first one is the game object that I'm going to influence. And in this game object, I need a public function that I can call. It needs to be public because otherwise this particular game object, the player capsule, is not able to access the function of the other game object. So it needs to be a public function. We're going to come back to that in a second. And then I need to tell the system on what grounds that callback function should be called, and that is done through callback flags. So currently it's set to nothing. I want to simply set that to music sync beat, and there are a couple of different options, and feel free to play around with them. They're actually quite fun, and there's a lot of things that you can do with this particular case of functionality within Wwise. So I'm not going to fill anything out yet because I don't really have anything prepared yet. So let me go into the jumping cube, and the first thing I need to do is I need to prepare the jumping cube. That means I need to add a public function to the jumping cube that I can access from the player capsule, and that is done through a script. So let's add a script component and new script, and let's call that create jump, create and add, and that's going to create this jump script. And in the jump script, I'm going to add a public function, a public void function. So let me go in here. So we can leave start and stop alone, and let me just add this function here. So it's going to be public. It's going to be void because we are not really kind of passing anything back, and it's going to be, let's call it on music beat. On music beat, and in order to test it, it's always a good idea, at least that's the way I do that, because that can be a little bit tricky. I want to make sure that that is actually called at the right time. I'm going to, before I do any more sophisticated logic, I'm just going to print out a debug statement so that whenever the music hits a beat, it's going to print out a debug statement. So let me do that here. A debug log, and let's simply say beat. And then I'm going to close that, and let's save that. And the last thing I now need to do is in the player capsule, where I have enabled the on callback mode. Where are we? Here we are, game object. I need to take the object that I'm influencing, which is the jumping cube. Need to put that in here, and I need to declare the callback function that I'm using. That was the callback function I just defined, that was called on music beat. Make sure that there are no typos here, because that is very difficult to debug if you have typos in these callbacks. And then I need to set the callback flags, and once again I want to do them on music sync beat. So whenever the music hits a beat, essentially that callback function should be called. And that is pretty much everything. So I'm going to go into the console. What should happen now is that whenever the music hits a beat, the debug statement should actually print beat. So let's see if that's actually what's happening, to make sure that everything is set up correctly. And that is not what's happening. What did I do wrong? I had it on the wrong callback flag, sorry. Nothing, not on started. I want it on sync beat. Let's try that again. Let's clear the console. So whenever a beat is hit, it is essentially calling it. So now it's actually working. Cool. So it did make sense that we first tried it with the debug statement. Okay. And now I'm going to add the logic into that function, because now I know it's actually being called. So let me go back into the jumping cube where the jump script lives. Let me open that up. And what I'm simply going to do is I'm simply going to set that transform to a different value where it's a little bit higher, because it's now a cube that has a rigid body component attached to it. It should fall back. That means I'm just kind of moving it up and falling back. Obviously, if you want to do something that's a little bit more sophisticated, you would create a much more complicated script or a more complex script that would kind of do things in a smoother way. We are just kind of jerking that cube into the air and then having it fall back. But we will see it's actually going to look reasonably well. So let me replace that. Now what we want to do is we want to access the current game object. In the current game object, the transform node, and in the transform node, the position statement. And we're going to set that to a new vector 3. Which is going to hold the value for, once again, slightly higher, 7 and 10. And that should be it. And let's save that. And let's go back into the game. And let's see if that works now. So let me move up there. Now I can already see that there's sort of if I look at the inspector, I already see that there's something happening there. So this seems to actually be jumping. So let me have a look. And it's actually really jumping in sync with the beat. And if I'm trigger entering the area, it's going to have that stinger. So that way you can communicate back to Wwise. And that brings me to the end of this series. So let's just have a brief recap of what we did this last 8 episodes. There are a couple of things that we really did. We created this music piece, which was in episode number 7. We had this little sound that is spatialized with an attenuation sphere. We had this magic cube that essentially is connected to a gain parameter, so when we're moving, the pitch is changing. It's a little bit difficult to hear now that the music is playing. You can hear that. We had this little reverb tunnel where we created a reverb with an auxiliary bus. We had this snow field where we changed these footsteps and also the sound as we're moving on there. The snow field itself was created with an ambient sound that used a large scale mode. Once again, this music is now not working well with that sort of ambience is not working well with the music. You would obviously change that. We had the big reverb zones where we used the EK environment and the EK portal, or the EK environment portal, 2 different reverb zones here. And then today we created that stinger. Oops, no, I fell down, sorry. And use the callback function to make that cube jump. So, as you can see, a lot of interesting things we can do with Wwise. Now, this is about as far as I wanted to take it in that particular series. Once again, this was something that I did for a class, and the syllabus essentially covered those types of topics. Audiokinetic Wwise has many more things to talk about and many more functionalities. I know that some commenters already requested some particular pieces, so I might actually pick those things up in the future, but they're not going to be part of that particular series. So if you have any requests or anything you want to know, drop me a note, leave a comment, and I'll try to get back to that. I will probably do it in a different way with smaller, shorter videos, but nevertheless, I'm more than happy to kind of to address any questions that you have. And other than that, if you liked that video series, give it a big like. If you got value out of that, please subscribe. That apparently is important in YouTube. Now for the coming weeks, I'm going to go back to a weekly posting. Kind of this, I only did this for the last couple of weeks simply because I wanted to have my regular weekly schedule not interrupted by the game audio series, because not everybody is interested in these types of videos, especially since they were so long. So I'm going to go back to a weekly posting schedule with shorter videos every Wednesday. And if you want to know anything that I can help you with, once again, leave me a comment. And other than that, do all the things people do on YouTube, and see you at the next video.